All right, good morning. This is the November 9th meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. The time is, let me see, 9:03 a.m.
Can I ask you to speak into the microphone? I think it's working.
Let me pull it up a little bit, maybe. Is that better?
Yes, much better.
Okay,
Thank you.
sorry. The time is 9:03 a.m. So Raymond, can you do roll call and let me know if there are any public comments, please?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Smith? Here. Mr. Wardy?
Here.
Miss Wilson?
Here.
Miss Bird?
Here.
Miss Enriquez? Here. And we are currently showing Miss Stevens and Mr. Reyes out.
Okay, so we have quorum. Are there any public comments?
None received.
All right, thank you. So we'll move to agenda item number 2, adoption of minutes for the RMA board meeting of October 12th, 2022. Are there any comments or amendments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve as submitted.
I second it.
I have a motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 3, discussion and an action on a board resolution authorizing the advertisement of a construction letting for the Fabens Airport International Project.
Good morning. Ray Mateus, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. I've got a PowerPoint that I'm going to walk you all through. This is very similar to the procurement that we discussed last month. This one, though, of course, is for Fabens Airport Improvements Project. So we'll talk about the purpose, the location, scope, and the timelines. The Fabens Airport Improvements Project is an El Paso County initiative, and as you may recall, there are several components to this particular project. We're looking at improving the airport entrance, which has been done. We improved Fabens Road. We're looking at adding hangars. That includes both box hangars and T hangars. We'll be talking about box hangars today. And then, as you know, we've designed an automated weather observation station and an expanded fuel farm, which hopefully can be funded later this year as well. So again, as I mentioned, this project is specifically talking about the box hangars, and we're looking to let in the coming months. Construction is anticipated to be completed within 2024. The budget for this one comes from an Economic Development Administration grant that the county has been awarded. And we will enter, and this format looks exactly like the regular projects that we do with the county. So we will come back to you with an interlocal agreement once the bids come in. That interlocal amendment actually will provide the funding from the county to the RMA so that we can manage construction activities. And of course, we'll bring on our general engineering consultant team to do the oversight once it's time to move to construction. This is the project location. Of course, it's Fabens Airport off of Fabens Road. The particular project that we're talking about is a construction of one new 100 by 100 box hangar. So it includes everything that you see there. And this one is actually a little bit interesting because of the funding that we received, or the county received for this one. They require office space and classroom space, and that's to support UTEP activities out there. So this is a part of that program that UTEP and the county have entered into. So it's everything else that you see there, everything that you would expect: fire suppression, water, plumbing, air conditioning, and the like. The subject to funding availability, we will definitely be doing one box hangar. We're hopeful that we can afford more than one. So that's how we will structure this procurement. So this is the layout here on the left-hand side. If you see this layout, these are the hangars that will be coming online. And they were designed by a firm that we've brought on through our IDC program. So we'll do one of those. And this is the layout. So this is the classroom here in the bottom right-hand corner. This is office space, and then this is the hangar space. And of course, this is where the name box hangar comes from, right? Straight up box. In terms of project scope, the role of the county, of course, is to provide the funding and owner decisions and guidance as we move through construction. The RMA will prepare and let the project for construction bids, and of course, we will do the construction management services through our general engineering consultant team. This is the proposed timeline. Now this may shift. We're discussing this one because as we head into the holiday season, there's there's some issues there in terms of workforce and that sort of thing. But as of right now, the current schedule looks like December 4th, we would put out the first advertisement. By the 11th, we would have the second advertisement, and then we would open bids January 10th. And then we'd be back to you all in early February for award, subject to change, of course. And I'll keep you posted on those dates. What we're looking at then, if that schedule were to be held, then we could start in March of 23, standard work week, and we think it'd be about 13 months of construction, which would put us at the end of, in summer 2024 for completion. So what's requested today then is a motion to approve a board resolution that authorizes the executive director to advertise a construction letting for the Fabens Airport Improvements Project, specifically the hangars. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Yes?
Did we already approve the change to the interlocal agreement, or?
No, sir. So the way that we normally do this is that we've got the original interlocal agreement that provides funding for the design activities all the way through the letting. And once the letting happens, then we'll know what the construction figures will be, and I'll come back to you with an amendment.
I move to approve.
I second it.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. Aye.
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 Motion passes. Moving on to item 4, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the execution of a contract for indefinite deliverable professional engineering design services with Consort Engineers, LLC.
So this one, as read into the record, relates to the IDC program, the Indefinite Deliverables Contract program that we recently went through the procurement for. This one is the first of the firms, Consort Engineering LLC, to complete contract negotiations. So this is the first of the 4 agreements that will come before you. The remaining ones that are still being negotiated out are AECOM, DEC, El Paso, and HDR. So this is the first one. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would recommend approval of this item.
Are there any questions? I'll call for a vote.
Motion to approve?
Thank
Second
you.
it.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 5, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to take such actions as necessary for the acquisition of the parcels required for the John Hayes Street Extension project.
So as a reminder, we are designing this particular project for the county, and we are also doing right-of-way acquisitions. For this particular project, there are 11 parcels that we are acquiring on behalf of the county. To date, of those 11, 2 are GLO lands, so we're still negotiating with GLO. That takes a little bit longer than normal processes. Of the remaining 9, 6 of those have an executed memorandum of agreement, so we've come to an agreement on the amounts being paid, and we're just pending payment from the county to the RMA so that we can then go close and execute deeds. So that's 6 of the 11. And 3, we've agreed to a sales price, and we're pending the MOAs, the memoranda of agreement. So we're in a good spot. We've actually been very lucky on this one, so we're in a good spot. So what you see before you then under this item is a resolution that authorizes me to execute any and all documentation necessary to complete these acquisitions. So that would include deeds, memoranda of agreement, and anything associated with it. It also authorizes the expenditure of the funds coming from the county to actually acquire those parcels. One final reminder on this one, a little bit unique, the RMA is taking these properties into our own name first. Once we've acquired all of them, then we will do a transfer to the county at that point later. So happy to answer any questions, but would recommend approval of this item.
Are there any questions? Yes?
On the GLO land, what takes so long there?
From what I understand, and I've not done an acquisition with the GLO before. What I understand, it just procedurally takes a little bit longer negotiating with a governmental entity. One other unique thing about this one is that the individual that the county has normally worked with in acquiring GLO lands is no longer there, so there's a new person, so that's adding a little bit of time. There's no, as been told to me, there's no cause for alarm at this point, but it does take just a little bit longer than a private acquisition.
Any other questions? Yes.
Over there, on this,
All right, go ahead, try now.
yeah, hit the screen.
It should be on.
Now,
I
go
put
ahead
it
and
on.
talk. Don't touch nothing else.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I should know that by now. I'm just curious why they're going, there'll be 2 transactions into the RMA and then to the county, and does that increase transaction cost? And is there any particular reason for that?
It does slightly increase transaction costs, but the deeds that we're using have been reviewed and approved by the county in advance, so it's pretty minimal. But that was at the request of the county. The idea was that they wanted them all packaged at once, as opposed to kind of
Okay, thank you.
parsing them out.
All right, if there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Sorry,
Aye.
second.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 6, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing certain actions related to the development of the Borderland Expressway project.
For this one, we've got another PowerPoint for you. So this is Borderland Expressway. We're going to talk about, just give you a brief reminder of the description, the background of the project. Then we're going to talk about 2 requests that have come from the planning committee, specifically dealing with the project, serving as the project sponsor, and Transportation Reinvestment Zone number 3 from the city of El Paso. So as a reminder, this is a graphic for you to remind you about the project location. The Borderland Expressway, of course, includes 2 components, one in Texas and one in New Mexico. New Mexico is advancing their component right now, and we are looking to support TxDOT's efforts to develop the Texas component. Texas is mainly new construction, while New Mexico is reconstruction and widening. So back on September 22nd of 2022, the board chair submitted a letter to TxDOT expressing interest from the RMA to take a more significant and active role in the development of the projects. You may remember receiving a copy of that. On November 1st, then, the planning committee met and discussed this project further and came back with a request to submit to the board, a request for approval to submit letters to TxDOT and to the city. So the first one is a letter to TxDOT requesting authority to serve as the project sponsor, and I'll briefly discuss what that means. But really, ultimately, it's seeking to get authorization from TxDOT to more actively pursue grant funds for the project. The second letter, then, an initiative would be a letter to the city requesting consideration of the use of its TRZ number 3 to leverage potential grant funding. And we'll talk about both of those in a little more detail. So as I mentioned, the idea from the planning committee would be to coordinate with TxDOT to serve as the project sponsor. Really what we're talking about here is getting authorization from TxDOT to begin looking at specific grant programs and even potentially developing the grant applications and submitting those. Now, there's a lot of moving parts in that relationship, and it would require quite a bit of coordination between the RMA and TxDOT to receive that approval. But that's what the request is coming from the planning committee. We've had some initial discussions with TxDOT as well, so this is not, this has been discussed, and so I want to mention that as well. So in terms of Transportation Reinvestment Zone number 3, so you may, and we've discussed these on a couple of different occasions. The city of El Paso has a couple of TRZs. This number 3 is actually in the Northeast. Let me move to that. So to orient you then, if we focus on this one first, this is Loop 375 here. And then, so this is essentially the route, the alignment for the Borderland Expressway. It used to be known as the Northeast Parkway. So just wanted to give you that visual first. So back in May of 2010, the city of El Paso created its Transportation Reinvestment number 3. So the idea there was to provide potential funding source for 2 projects. The first was the project that TxDOT was pursuing at the time, which was the Northeast Main Lanes expansion. And really what TxDOT was doing at that time was expanding 375 and removing the street lights and all that sort of thing to make that final connection basically from Dyer up through US 54. So it included that underpass. So that was a big project that TxDOT was looking to develop under the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan. The city agreed to provide some funds to support that project through TRZ number 3. And the way it would do that was to assign the TRZ number 3 revenues to the RMA. The RMA would issue debt and provide those funds for the development of the project. The second project that was envisioned when the TRZ was created was the Northeast Parkway, which is now known as the Borderland Expressway. So that's why you saw in the map that I just showed you, the alignment of the proposed Northeast Parkway was included in TRZ number 3. So back to the second paragraph here. When the TRZ number 3 was created, all of the revenues off of that TRZ have been assigned to the RMA. The RMA went out and issued $6 million in debt for the development of the Northeast Main Lanes project. In the end, that $6 million was used for the aesthetic improvement. So when you look at the Northeast section and you see that snakeskin pattern, that was developed using the funds assigned by the city. And in fact, actually, TxDOT liked it so much they used it on the Northwest side as well. But that's the only debt that was issued. There was no debt issued off of TRZ number 3 for the Northeast Parkway. So that debt could be extinguished as early as 2023. And why that's important is that the legislation that governs TRZs says when you extinguish debt on any particular TRZ, then that TRZ expires at the end of that calendar year. So that's important. So that leads us into this first paragraph here. If the city is interested in participating in the Borderland Expressway project, it could authorize the RMA to utilize TRZ number 3 to go issue additional debt for the Borderland Expressway project. So that's the point here, to flag this for the city, let them have that conversation and see if they want to utilize TRZ number 3 before it goes away, because the debt will be paid off here pretty soon. So that's what you see before you then. The RMA's planning committee has asked the full board to consider submitting a formal request to the city regarding the use of TRZ number 3 as a potential source for the project. So that's really what I have for you, and I think we've gone through all of that. But I would ask Mr. Smith as the planning chair to chime in and see if I missed anything.
Yes, would you go back to the first part there about TxDOT?
TxDOT, yes, sir.
Project sponsor. First off, we had an amazing planning committee meeting, Mary Beth and Silver and I, and we had a lot of participation. A lot of people were there to include TxDOT. Marty Boyd, who you know is the planner for TxDOT, she was there, contributed a tremendous amount to the meeting. And in all of the offline meetings and discussions that we've had with TxDOT, they're receptive to our proposals in that they're not going to just push them aside and say no way. They seem to be receptive. We've even thrown the suggestions out to them as we put grant proposals together. That's going to take money. And so they were a big part of financing that last effort that we did, the futile, I will call it, bond grant submission that we did. And so as we go forward with another grant, it looks like we have the participants on board. And then using the auspices of the MPO, Eduardo, the MPO was also represented there, that I think we've got a pretty good path working with people that are willing to work together for us to achieve that goal. So that's why we as a planning committee submitted this to the board to seek the board approval for us as the Regional Mobility Authority to go forward formally and request the things we discussed. So the second item, which is the getting together with the city and working the issues of TRZ number 3, this is a golden opportunity for us to, as we go forward with a grant proposal, to have total cooperation by all the players, to include the city, and the proverbial skin in the game type thing where we have to do some local matches. And so our proposal as a committee, again, is to come to the board to seek authorization and for the executive director to put forward a formal application to the city to continue TRZ number 3 to help us fund that, some contributions to and matching funds for our grants application. Now, the issue with that, the big issue with the city, is that will, if the city signs up to that, that's basically going to mean that that set of tax revenues from that TRZ number 3 is not going to go to the city. It's going to come to the RMA to service a debt. And the estimate that I got there from staff was that's approximately about $1 million a year that they would be forfeiting if they granted that TRZ number 3 to continue on to be the backdrop for another SIB loan as part of the city's skin in the game for a grant application. So those are the two major items we discussed. Very active meeting with a lot of great participants, and I will pass it to Mary Beth if she has any comments she wants to add about the meeting.
Sure, I'd characterize it as they were more than receptive. I'd say they were encouraging. And beyond that immediate portion, they were encouraging the RMA to think broader than that, even extending the zone to actually complete the project more quickly, which could have other benefits. So they were literally encouraging and asking us to think bigger. So it was an interesting and good meeting.
Who's they, TxDOT?
TxDOT and the
MPO.
MPO. Everyone there.
Everybody.
Were there any city representatives there?
No.
Okay.
No.
So have there been any conversations with the city about this at all up to this point?
Only with Representative Molinar,
Okay.
who is receptive as well, I would.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that when we submit this, it's like no kind of blindsiding people. They're not expecting it. But if there's been someone in the communications, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I might add that Raymond and I and Representative Ordaz went and visited Representative Molinar and gave him this full briefing on the TRZ3, and they came up with a game plan on how to submit the letter and application to the city and to the council, and he has promised to champion that through the process.
Okay.
I have a question. As far as the city is concerned, you said that you talked to only one city representative. Why? Why no one else was included in that conversation, or you only wanted to talk to only him at this time?
So I'll mention, the idea was we wanted to see if there was something to this concept first. So we went to the representative in whose district this is. And then we're bringing it to the board to see if the board is okay with us taking it broader and actually talking to staff. And much to your point, Ms. Wilson, the idea would be that we would go to the staff first, make sure they know what this is before we drop it on anybody's lap. So we don't want any surprises. So, but ultimately, to answer your question, went to the representative in whose district this is first to make sure that there was some interest in it. And now we've come to the board to ask for authorization to go broader.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I would also just add that if it is extended, this is one critical piece, but it also ties into a lot of other things that have been discussed, even the Santa Teresa ultimately, because that's where it ultimately comes in. So there's many, many reasons for it to be well received.
I have another question. For Texas, it was going to be 10.4 miles. And with Mary Beth saying that how they wanted you to be able to actually increase it, is there a probability of it being longer than the 10.4 miles for Texas, since New Mexico is going to be 11.4?
Well, the project itself wouldn't expand. The number of lane miles would stay the same. What Ms. Stevens is really referring to is the size of the TRZ. So the TRZ could be expanded to include more sections of the Borderland Expressway. But the project itself, Borderland Expressway, wouldn't increase in size.
And the other thing that that Mary Beth was referring to is that we had submitted a letter to TxDOT requesting the first phase, for us to be a very active part in the first phase. And her comment was, you need to look at going forward with a request to do the whole thing. So that was pretty encouraging.
And the whole thing is still 3 phases.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I second it.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 7, discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the submittal of grant applications for the Thriving Communities and Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation SMART programs.
Okay, for this one, we've got a bit of a change. Originally, we were looking at partnering with various agencies in the area to submit 2 potential applications. So the first one deals with Thriving Communities. I'll touch on that one next. But first, let me just mention the SMART program. We had discussed with TxDOT a potential idea that they had to deal with some of the congestion that they have on I-10 for folks heading into Juarez at the Free Bridge, the Bridge of the Americas. We weren't really able to put that together in a way that worked for us and the city and TxDOT. So at this point, we're not going to pursue that SMART program application at this time. But Thriving Communities, we're still interested in that. So let me briefly touch on that. And I've included a fact sheet as part of your backup, so you have a general understanding of what that program is. It is part of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. The idea with Thriving Communities is really to support under-resourced communities, to allow them, to give them the resources that they need to go after all of these grant funds as well. So it's very similar when you think about the effort that you all have approved for us to spend up to $100,000 to support Clint and Sanelli and all of our smaller regional municipalities. It's very similar, right? The intent is still the same, and that is to provide support to those communities that don't necessarily have the resources to submit under the the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So Thriving Communities, though, specifically has 2 components. One, an applicant can submit an application for funding to serve as a capacity builder. So the idea there would be, if an applicant were to receive award, they would have up to $6 million so that they could provide support to smaller communities when the DOT matches those smaller communities to the capacity builder. So that's one component of the program. The other component is actually the application from the under-resourced communities themselves, seeking to get on that list through the DOT, from which the DOT would then assign a capacity builder. What we're looking at doing here is submitting a letter of interest for the second component, right? So the idea would be, and we've discussed this with the Council of Governments, with the El Paso MPO, we would go in as a coalition identifying all of our regional communities like Sanelli and Clint and Horizon City, and identify those as under-resourced communities that need support from capacity builders under our umbrella, and that's how we're looking to support, to submit the letter of interest. So in a nutshell, that's what we're looking at doing. The application is, or the letter of interest is due December 6th, so I wanted to bring that forward and request support. So the resolution is part of your backup, as is the fact sheet. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would recommend approval of this item for the Thriving Communities program.
Are there any questions?
I'll make a comment that we at the board's request, we, the planning committee, were looking at the grant applications for all these separate little projects that our executive director has been working on. And each of those are still alive, but the concept and the idea that was presented to us about having that come under this umbrella of the Thriving Communities looks like it would add a lot of credence to any application that goes forward. Is that the right way to state that, Raymond?
I think so. I think the point of it is really to access the resources that the capacity builders will be providing, and really what we're doing is we're expanding our $100,000 that we're providing to get access to HNTB and our resources. We're really expanding that into the capacity builders as well. So once we have this list of projects from Clinton, San Eli, and the smaller communities, we'll be able to decide which one are we going to use a capacity builder for, which one will we use our own resources for. So that's the idea.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Raymond. I think this is an area where I've continued to push that we have the greatest opportunity to have an impact, and that's on the smaller jurisdictions that really don't have the resources and wherewithal to take advantage of some of these opportunities. So I'm glad to see that there's a concerted effort for us to play a major role in that. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8, discussion and action on the RMA priorities for the 88th Texas Legislative Session.
So for this item, included in your backup is the resolution that identifies the legislative priorities for this upcoming legislative session for Texas. It's very similar to the one that we adopted for the last legislative session, with the exception of the final two items, and I wanted to mention those specifically. The first of the two is funding for Weiler Aerial Tramway. Of course, we'll be supportive of any and all initiatives at the legislature to fully fund that project. The second one is the Texas-Mexico Border Transportation Master Plan, and you may recall this was a big effort that was put together by TxDOT all along the Mexico border, and the point there was to develop basically a comprehensive list of all transportation projects that impact or relate to crossings. So that's what that master plan is. It's a huge plan. Unfortunately, it's unfunded, but over $1 billion worth of transportation projects within there. Several billion, if I recall correctly. So the idea with this item is then to support all initiatives to secure funding for projects within that border transportation master plan. So those are the two additions for this legislative cycle. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would recommend approval of this item as well.
So the optional vehicle registration fee, are you talking about raising it another $10?
Just allowing under the legislation to allow for that. So that's something that has been in the last couple of cycles, and not just for El Paso, but other counties are seeking that as well. So this is to authorize the RMA to support any initiatives to increase that.
But that would have to be voted on by the residents of El Paso County.
That's correct. This is literally just to amend the legislation, which currently only allows that initial $10. This would revise that to allow the El Paso County to be added to that legislation that could pursue additional funds. But you're right, it would require a vote of the people here in El Paso.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Have any of these items been discussed with any of the coalitions or your counterparts at this point?
There are actually several of these that are on the City of El Paso's legislative
Okay.
Priority list as well. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
And I've spoken a couple of times with Lupe Cuellar, who is currently managing legislative initiatives for the city as an outside service.
Okay. And then the Chambers Committee, Legislative Committee, Are they involved in any of this at this point?
I've not spoken with them about our
Okay.
list. No, but I can certainly do that, and will do
Well,
that.
I mean, I just want to make sure there's nothing here that's in conflict with other priorities that would create a problem. But I assume if it is, that we would just drop it.
Certainly. Well, what we can do is if you'd like to approve these as is, I can then coordinate with the chamber, and if there are any issues, I can bring them back for discussion.
Or if there's other items that we might want to amend this so that we're all in alignment, that would be something else too that we should
Certainly,
do.
these are intended to be living documents, right? So as
Okay.
the legislature, as the legislators move, we'll be able to come back and discuss items that aren't on here.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 9, staff reports. We have A, the status of the fiscal year 2022 annual audit. B, transportation alternative set-aside call for projects for the 24-25 Sun Cycle Fleet Enhancement Project. Item C, refinancing of state infrastructure bank loans. Item D, status of the Pelicano Drive widening project. And item E, status of the Mission Ridge Boulevard Phase 2 drainage and street improvement project.
Good morning, Robert Studer, Director of Finance. For the record, I'll be handling A, B, and C. On A, we've started the audit. We're underway. We're still scheduled to finish hopefully before Christmas and then meet with the Finance Committee in early January before bringing the full audit to the board at the January meeting. On B, we did submit the application to the MPO last month. Award is anticipated, or notification of award is hopefully in December, and we would receive the funds next fall. And then on C, the Texas Transportation Commission approved our refinancing. We're still working with State Infrastructure Bank staff to get the agreement in front of us and get new amortization schedules. We should hopefully have that wrapped up to take to the Finance Committee in January and then provide the board the actual savings that we anticipate City of El Paso taxpayers will receive off of that. And that's what I have for you.
There's no action required, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So then items D and E.
I would request that we move into executive session to discuss those two items.
Okay. Let me see what time it is. It is now 9:40 a.m. on November 9th, 2022, and the CRRMA Board of Directors will now retire into executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071 for the purpose of consulting with attorney. We will reconvene the open meeting upon conclusion of the executive session. Okay, thank you, everybody, for your time and attention. It's 10:38 a.m. on November 9th, 2022, and the Board of Directors of the CRRMA is reconvening its open meeting after deliberations in executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071. The board consulted with our attorney but took no action in executive session. So with regard to item 9, staff reports D and E, there are no further discussion or action at this time. There are no other business.
No, ma'am, that's it.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned 10:39 a.m. Thank you all.